The Back in the Wereld is a project that is about the things that we know. So it's the known world in Dutch. And the idea is to take things that we know very well, daily objects, mundane objects, and to take them slightly out of your experience, take them out of the way that we know them. So the cell phone that we have in our hands all the time, for that to be something that's worth looking at more closely and wondering at a little bit rather than this very mundane thing. So by putting the title in Dutch, I'm not Dutch, but by putting the title in Dutch, it takes something that we know and just shifts it ever so slightly. The idea is to take these things and ask you to think about them kind of carefully. I work in photographs because I think that photography is the language of the contemporary world. Video is as well. If I had been born a few hundred years ago, maybe I'd be a painter now. But I want to work using photographs because that's a language that we use all the time. These are things that we see every day in a way that we never sort of used to. By fact of them being photographs, that's sort of a part of this thing that we know, of that known world, and making those objects, rather than be familiar ads, making them into something sort of very different than that. That's very important to me. The still lifes are meant to relate to the portraits, are meant to relate to landscapes, are meant to relate to the still lifes. Everything is meant to be intertwined, so it's difficult for me to kind of talk about the still lifes without talking about portraits in particular, just because the portraits are these figures, these individuals, and they're important as individuals, but they're also meant to relate with those still lifes. And the still lifes, those objects don't have any inherent meaning. They only have meaning when we give them meaning. And there are these mass-produced things, and they don't necessarily deserve the kind of value that we give them, but there it is. We give them a huge amount of value. So the relationship between the figures in the portraits and the still lifes is really key to the whole way that I sort of think about the project. I don't think this is too much different than kind of what I've done in the past, where it's a little bit making these arrangements, like instead of with food or other things, now it's like just with these sort of mundane studio things. So here I've just taken a picture on the back of the camera. That's why it looks kind of strange when we've got this grid, but I think I'm going to move this slightly forward and to the right so it just sits more or less right in that line. I kind of like this thing coming out and occupying that space. I like the sort of line work here. I think that's interesting, but this space just was a little empty to me. So I think I just want to move this thing slightly over, see how that works. Yeah, I think we'll go for it. See what happens. For me, it's important to take objects that are not necessarily valuable objects. I don't want to kind of fetishize objects that are already fetishized, So for me to go take a picture of a beautifully wrought, like, golden object, defeats the purpose, because that thing is already beautiful and we look at it with this sort of elevated sense of awe. And so what I'm hoping to do is to take mundane objects, very cheaply made objects, and elevate them to that state. So to take the things that we don't give a second thought to take the duck sauce in the made in China picture, or to take fake flowers, and to make those things something that's worth spending time with. And then I think the other question is the materialism, which is just to say that we as a culture are so object driven. Capitalism, where we go out and we buy things. And on one hand, that's a bummer, that's what we're driven by as a culture. But on the other hand, it means we've been able to produce pretty incredible things. And so I'm ambivalent on that. And I mean that in that sense of the word, that I feel I have misgivings about that culture. And so I want to look at the really cheap throwaway things that we kind of produce and that we throw away. But I also want to look at them not only as cheap throwaway things, but as these things kind of worth valuing. And then the other part is the way that those things get produced, this sort of taking a step back. So it's one thing that we consume them, it's another thing that they get produced somewhere. So made in China is kind of a jokey stab at that. But also just taking this idea, this general idea that it's not just we know the phone, or not just that we know a fake orange or something like that, but it's that was made somewhere and somebody's job is to produce that thing, so that there are people at every step along the way, and it's not just the consumer at the end, it's also the producer, and those things can be intertwined. Well, there's definitely no what came first in this project. For me, the whole way that this works is that these things are fundamentally intertwined. So I think of that as being a pretty key component of my project, but just sort of a defining characteristic of the contemporary world, that things are intertwined. This is a fundamentally global world, a global culture, especially in America, where we're so, for good and bad, intertwined with world events.